Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Did It Better? My name is Peter Cho, and with me as always is...
Christine.
This week we're looking at stage filmic adaptations with Phantom of the Opera from 2004 and Les Miserables from 2012.
Yeah, I mean, mostly musical specifically. Adaptation of a musical from the stage to the screen.
And I guess I'll just jump into my old man reminisces, which is weird. I have a lot to say about this.
What a surprise. Blow me away with your memories, old man.
Okay, so actually, for the first time for our podcast, I watched the movie for the very first time. Like I'd never seen the Phantom of the Opera movie before.
No way.
Yeah, and of course I knew about the play and the movie forever, but I just like I don't want to watch it. I just was never into it, so I just kept putting it off until you forced me to watch it. But
I don't blame you.
yeah, that's actually not true. With the pandemic, they've been putting on stage plays to stream. So when they're going to put on Phantom of the Opera, I just thought, okay, I am finally going to watch it. And I, for some reason, I didn't really know what it was about. Like I knew about the movies and the disfigured creature, but what really threw me off is I didn't realize how much opera was in it. I was like, what why are they singing opera? I was like, oh yeah, that's the title, but it just really threw me off, and I couldn't get into it for a while. I'm like, I don't want to listen to this. And then the big songs came on, and I was like, oh, I actually like the production, and then I finally watched the movie this weekend. At this point, I'd heard that it was bad, so I'm going into the movie thinking it's going to be bad, and I'm not a huge fan of Joel Schumacher, and just my mind was blown beforehand, and I'd seen clips, but just going into it thinking, I just can't believe that Gerard Butler is going to be the Phantom, and I didn't mind it. I think it's because I went in thinking, oh God, this is going to be terrible, and I thought, oh well, it was okay. It didn't really do much for me. So for Les Mis, that started back in 2012 when the movie was about to come out. And this is going to be a big issue with our podcast where I had to see this movie because of the actors in it. I was like, whoa, weird. It's like Hugh, Anne Hathaway, and Russell Crowe. I was like, wait a minute. They're saying I've got to see it just for them. And I know this is really unfair. And I think we talked about this at the time that Anne Hathaway was getting a lot of good press about playing Fantine. And she's on Letterman. I watch Letterman every night. And all this time, I really didn't know what Les Mis was about. I didn't know what was going to happen. Didn't know anything. So she just, in the interview, talks about her character dying. And I was like, spoiler, like, wait a minute. Well, you can't tell. You can't talk about that. I remember saying this to you, and you just stared at me like, what are you talking about? Everybody knows Fantine's like, I didn't know she was going to die. So now I was like, see, I hate spoilers like that. But, I know it's a dumb comment for something that was so old. I go to the movie alone, and I didn't know what I was going to expect. And I knew some of the songs, but not really well. And I really liked it. I was like, huh, I was kind of shocked. And at the time, we were working at the TIFF Lightbox. And at that point, I was doing some manager shifts. And as you know, you're in the back alone in the office. And sometimes you just get bored. And at the end of the night, you have to cash out. So you're alone. So then I just put stuff on YouTube. So I think for about 3-4 weeks, I cashed out every night listening to the Les Mis 25th anniversary concert. And again, you're getting on me. I was like, what? Again? I was like, well, it's just easy to listen to. And it's 2.5 hours. So then it would take me, like the week to listen to. And I just kept listening to it all the time. So at that point, I really got to know the songs and got to know the play in my brain. And then I finally saw the play months later because I thought, well, now it's perfect timing. It's playing in Toronto. And I remember I was just working my brains out, and I worked 28 days in a row, and I knew I was going to. So at the end of it, my one day off, I thought, I'm going to Les Mis. I'm going to treat myself. I'm gonna spend almost $200 to get like a second row seat and just enjoy it. And I really did enjoy it. Didn't remember much about it, to be honest. I was like, yeah, I did like it. Watching everything for this podcast, things all came together, and I would just kept getting shocked. I was like, oh, let me look up who these people are in all these different versions and trying to put it together in my head. So for the Phantom, of course, like who is the Phantom? It's like, oh, it's Ramin. It's like, oh, okay, he was really good. And then I rewatched the 25th anniversary Les Mis. I was like, hey, he's in this. Look at again. I can't believe now I recognize him. And then I started Googling. I'm like, oh yeah, who was Valjean when I saw it in Toronto? I was like, it's him. It's like Ramin was the Valjean. Like I just didn't remember that at all. I just didn't remember the names. I didn't piece it together. I was like, oh, he's my guy. The guy who I've been following around clearly. And then one of the last things I did was I was like, oh yeah, you'll get into it, but your man is Colm Wilkinson. It's like, oh yeah, remember you went to that special play where he came on and they sang the duet, and I watched it on YouTube, and then I don't think I tried to get a ticket, but when I kept looking about it, everybody's like, this is a once in a lifetime event. You're never gonna see this again. This is the best thing ever. I'm like, I should have gone, but at least Christine did. So now I throw it all over to you.
So you're talking about after the film came out, there was a special run in Toronto of Cameron Mackintosh, the original producer's new version of Les Mis. I went 4 times. And that wasn't necessarily on purpose. It didn't start out that way. I intended going once, and then I found out about the special charity event, which was with, you mentioned Ramin Karimloo playing Valjean, who, as you said, also played the Phantom on stage, and actually plays Christine Daae's dad in the movie A Phantom of the Opera. I think it's just a photo of him. So there's all these crossovers. Anyway, he's Canadian, so he's playing Valjean, and the bishop was being played by Colm Wilkinson. And then they came out at the end and had a special duet at the end of Bring Him Home, and it just went on and on. It was amazing. It was all for charity. So when I found out they were doing that, I was like, okay, well, obviously I have to go to that. And then someone else was like, oh, I want to go. Will you go with me? And I was like, okay. And then someone else was like, I have a chance to get another set of tickets. Will you go with me? So I ended up going 4 times in one season. So that's added to the time when I went when it was this first run. I've seen it 5 times. Once with Colm Wilkinson in the original Toronto touring company, and then the second time when he came out as the bishop for the charity production. It's my favorite musical, so I need, like, if it comes, I'm going to go see it, but it rarely tours because it's such an expensive production. And since you saw this version, the most recent version, which has a lot of sort of light displays or rear projection and things like that, it doesn't have the spinning stage, which the first production had, where like the middle of it turned so you look like you were walking and you could go from one side of the barricade to the other. I went to see the Phantom of the Opera in the Toronto run, which I think was the early 90s. I was really, really young. My mom was obsessed with musicals, so I'd heard about it forever, the Phantom of the Opera, and I was finally got to go. Colm Wilkinson's star. It was his understudy.
Oh no.
So I've never seen him as the Phantom. I've only heard recordings. It was such a bummer. I remember even at I think I was like 10 or something, and I was heartbroken, even though I barely knew who he was. So the fact that he came back as Valjean a few years later, it's like, thank God. But yeah, in terms of the movies, I saw Phantom of the Opera when it came out in 2004, but as usual, on DVD rental, watch it by myself. I don't remember particularly liking it back then and being surprised by Gerard Butler, because I think by that point, I think I only knew him from the Dracula movie. So it was really weird, a weird choice. And then Les Mis 2012, I saw on Boxing Day. So the day after it was released. It was, again, my mother and I, who I saw all 5 of those Les Mis productions. I always saw with my mom. That was our sort of post-Christmas present to ourselves, and I loved it. I just had, oh, my expectations were so high, and it was such a great experience. Yeah, so I have pretty vivid memory. See, I finally have a vivid theatrical memory,
I knew
and
it.
it's Les Mis. But I'm glad you pointed out all those crossovers because there's so many crossovers between all the different versions of Les Mis and the film and the Phantom of the Opera. It's pretty wild. But I guess if you play Valjean, there's a good chance that you've played the Phantom on stage. That's one of those roles that you kind of trade with each other. Anyway, that's enough of me nerding out. Well, actually, it's not. There's going to be a whole lot more, probably. But we'll move on for now.
So yeah, you already talked about it, but you clearly love Les Mis. But what do you think of Phantom of the Opera in general?
So I thought I had kind of a love hate relationship with it. When I first saw it as a kid, I loved it. And to be fair, this stage production, similar to Les Mis, there's a lot of technical aspects to it that are really, really impressive. Les Mis had the spinning stage, as I mentioned. The Phantom, which came out before it, or at least in Toronto, it did. It has the crashing chandelier scene, which actually happens in the theater. They have the fog machine, which makes it look like they were rowing a boat on in through the sewers, and all of that looks amazing. And all the candles, like I was just blown away by it as a kid, even without Colm Wilkinson. And I actually have no recollection of who. I had no recollection of who the Phantom understudy was until I went to a Christmas party a couple of years ago here in the city. I used to work at a costume house, a costume company, and it's friends that I used to with from there. One of them was having a Christmas party, and one of the other guys I worked with used to be in musicals. He was a musical theater actor. He was in Cats in Toronto in the 80s. I think he was Rum Tum Tugger, and I played one of the other roles as well. So I got chatting with him. His partner was Colm Wilkinson's understudy, and I had known this guy for years, and I had no idea that that's who his partner was. So that's who I saw as the Phantom. I didn't get to see Colm. I saw my friend's partner. So that was kind of a weird coincidence. But anyway, so I loved it at the time. And then as I grew up and I saw other musicals, I started to think about how it can be pretty cheesy. I mean, a lot of musicals are cheesy. And I got kind of bored with it and sort of poo-pooed it. And it wasn't until a few years ago that a touring company came back to Toronto, and a friend of mine who had never seen it wanted to go. And I was like, I don't know, I've seen it, it's so over it. I was kind of making fun of it and stuff. But I went, of course, because I never say no to going to a musical. And I remembered how much I liked it. I was like, I shouldn't have poo-pooed this. This is actually really great. Even the singer, I think he was some American Idol type contestant who was singing, and he did a pretty good job, I have to say, considering he's not, an operatic singer. And even when I was watching this version, it made me remember how much I liked the stage production. So I take it back. It's not my favorite like Les Mis, but it's right up there.
Yeah, right off the bat, I would say that I am not a theater person. Like flat out, I'm a film person. Like I love everything about film. So whenever I see a stage play, I was like, I wish I could have a close up right now. I wish I could have different angles and all that stuff. So a lot of times it is difficult for me to watch a play. Like there's just something very specific that would get me there. Like what did you want? What would you want when they're adapting a musical like these two?
Well, it's kind of like what you just said, when you're in the theater, yeah, unless you're right up in the front row, you can't get close ups. You can't really get in there with the characters. Um, and then also, if you're right up front row, you can't get to see the massive scale of it too. So I don't know. I think for me, I want it to be really filmic. I want it to be really cinematic. Why I never really understood it when you know plays or musicals would be adapted and they feel like they're still on a stage, like it's still limited to one space and there's not a lot of multi-camera use. So yeah, I want all the things that I can't get when I'm on the stage, plus things you get in the theater, which is the quality performances and the musicality of it. So I think that's the biggest thing. I want to see somebody who understands film. Maybe a film director with a background in theater rather than a theater director with a background in film. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like I want to make it epic, and that's the big thing about Les Mis. Like it's all these different decades and different locations and a war. So like, this is perfect. Like you keep the heart of it, but then you just open it up. I don't know if it's like an unfair advantage where, as with Phantom, a lot of it takes place in a theater. So, Les Mis can open up and you can begin it with a giant boat. That's what blew me away at the very, very first shot where they're pulling the boat in the water and all that. I was just like, oh my God. Because my idea is like watching the movie is like, how did they turn this into a play? Like my brain was the opposite because it was so epic and just so real. So they always showed the streets and the people and everything in Les Mis for me like felt alive. It's like you could see how these people lived and what the world was like. I thought right away, I'm like, oh, good job. Les Mis has so many close-ups, and a lot of it is that thing where he wanted to capture the emotions, and we'll obviously get into the music where it's like they sung live, so the camera's like in their face, and because they're live, they're acting. They can adapt. They can kind of ad lib, so the camera has to follow them, and a lot of it is just on their face, or it's a tracking shot because they want to capture the full performance because it is more difficult to cut between live performances like that. And I found Phantom more staged, but at the same time it should be in a way. So flat out, I was watching Phantom. I was like, God, I'm just bored a lot of times, and
Mm.
it's hard for me to still at this moment decide why. It's like, is it because the actors aren't that great? It's like the costumes are beautiful. I'll definitely say that, but there's just not a lot of energy there. Whereas Les Mis is also very different because everything is sung. So it's like one nonstop song almost. So you're always into it and you're always paying attention to that. Whereas with Phantom, there's people actually speaking and slowing things down. So I don't know if that's the big difference.
They're not speaking that much. I don't know if I would ding it for that. Um, but I think it could have, like you said, it gives an opportunity to open up the world. And yeah, Phantom's limited because it is all pretty much in that opera house. But they did have opportunity, like in the case of Phantom, to open up the world. Like you said, it would be to focus on the costumes and the decadence of the opera costumes, which they did to an extent. But then they would do, instead of maybe be more creative with the camera movement in the shots, it did feel pretty static. Like if you think about the masquerade scene, yeah, we got some nice close-ups of the costumes, but it's still, in terms of the wide shots, it still felt like a small stage space. Whereas, if Tom Hooper was doing it, there might have been more crane shots to do, make it even grander, add levels to it, add more extras. I mean, obviously it's a budget thing too, but you could have really turned it up a notch. Whereas that in this version, it doesn't look that different from when you see it actually in the theater, because in the theater it is just as big as that. It's a massive set on the stage. But they could have done more. I mean, I think they made this Phantom sewer hideout more real. But at the same time, I can see them saying, oh, well, everybody loves that boat scene on the stage where it comes in, so we have to have that. And I have to say, when I saw the horse show up, because I'd kind of forgotten how it went, I was like, oh, God, are they leaving out the boat? You can't not have the boat. So I was happy when it showed up. I'm glad they did that. I think they did a little bit there, but they could have shown us more backstage with the dancers. There could have been a lot more movement because there's such a flurry of people everywhere all the time. But I feel like we're kind of pulled back from them rather than amongst them. It's not terrible. It just could have been better. So we're talking about style, making it look cinematic. But do you think that, or when you find out about an adaptation from a stage, show, even though you're not a theater guy, do you want there to be film actors in it, or do you have any stake in that at all? Do you not care?
Well, the big difference is like I seen Glengarry Glen Ross, I love David Mamet, which is all dialogue. And for that movie, I've seen the play and I've seen the film, and I'm honestly glad they got big film stars to be in the movie. Like they're amazing. And with these two, to be brutally honest, I think number one, you have to have good singers.
Yeah, so you don't care if there's Hollywood stars in it.
That was the whole thing. But as I said at the beginning, the reason I went to see Les Mis was because of the actors, right? And that I can't like rail against the Hollywood system because I know exactly how it works. Whenever you hear it's like the producers saying, "Oh, we need this big actor," it's like, but it's actually true. Like all the international markets, whatever, they're not making a great movie. They're making a movie to make money and to appeal to people. So I know that's the way it always is. But hopefully they get a good blend. Hopefully you get actors which are good and big names who can actually sing. So that is the big thing about these two, particularly. But it doesn't bother me when 99% of the time they replace the great stage actors with these film actors in the movie version. Because again, that's how they go. But I just feel bad for them more than anything. Not that they care, but it's just like why? Like they've been doing this for 3 years. They are amazing at it. Why not give them a chance? That's the way I
Mm-hmm.
mostly feel, but I just feel bad for the stage actors.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying, for marketing purposes to get a wider audience, non-musical theater audience, they want to have non-musical theater actors, like big movie actors in it. And I do get that, but I personally don't care. I would rather them find I think it's more likely that you will find a musical theater actor who is also a really great performer, not just great singer, then you are more likely to find a Hollywood actor who's also a great singer.
Yeah.
Like they're doing the same thing in the musical. And some musical theater actors are cheesy, but most of them they got the chops to not sing and still be compelling. So I would just rather than just hire all the people who have the check boxes on their resumes rather than, Hollywood A-listers. But then sometimes you get lucky and then they end up being both. But it's very rare, as we can see with Gerard Butler and Russell Crowe. But yeah, I just wanted to go back to, before we get into that, what you said about the opening of Les Mis. That was the biggest thing for me. Like as I, how much I love this show. When I went to see it, I was like, this better be good. I was super excited about it. But that opening with the flag and coming out of the water and that massive, even though CG shot of the ship and they're all pulling the ropes, all the prisoners, that I was like, okay, somebody knows what they're doing. They're in it to win it. And it instantly set me at ease. Like you said, the scale of it sort of shouted out, as you said, this is a massive story with so many characters and such a huge timeline. And we're starting it off in a massive, very cinematic way, outdoors with some CG stuff. Just big, big, big. So I think I'm not a huge fan of Tom Hooper, but I really feel like he knocked it out of the park in terms of adapting it for the screen for that reason, for all the location shots. Um, and we'll get into the singing and stuff later, but when you have the extras who sing, not extras, the background players or whatever who come in and sing sometimes, they don't always sound like strong singers, but when they're playing like a prisoner and singing live and it's not strong, that works to make it feel like you're in that world. I think that's the difference. I didn't feel as much that I was in the world of the Phantom of the Opera as I did. I feel like I was in the world of Les Mis.
Yeah, I also say I am not a fan of Tom Hooper at all. I think this is the only movie of his that I can tolerate.
I think so too.
I mean, yeah, Cats is an atrocity beyond measure. So I don't know
Mm.
how he got this right, or maybe because he got this right is why Cats is so bad because he just lost his mind. But uh, but yeah, like all the choices he made just really worked. Like the barricade sequence, it's so spectacular to me because, of course, you have the big scale of a movie, but when the big battle happens towards the end, he just put six cameramen in the fight, and he just said, "You two go at it," and he shot it as if it was real. It's like, there you go. Like just decisions like that. It's like it just made it so filmic. It's so real. Obviously, the biggest choice that he made was to have everybody sing live,
Hmm.
and I think that was genius. Like it enabled the actors to perform on stage in front of a camera instead of lip syncing like every other musical before that.
And it's weird because you think of it as being cinematic in the sense that, like I said, they're bringing us into this world that we were at a distance from in the theater. So live singing makes it feel like you're really there, and it adds like a sense of realism to it, which you can't really do in a musical theater stage. But at the same time, it also connects to seeing it in the theater because you're used to hearing it live in the theater. That's what you're supposed to hear. So it's, I don't know, it's both cinematic and theatrical at the same time somehow.
Yeah, I remember as a kid not knowing anything and then watching maybe even just some clips of old musicals, and I was just like, I don't get it. What just happened to the sound when they started singing? I was like, something's different. Like, and then of course I learned it
Mm.
was all recorded ahead of time, and they're just blasting it back, and it just doesn't sound the same at all. The big performance with Anne singing "A Dream Dream." It's like it's because she was able to sing it live that she was able to do that. Like I think that's a great performance, but she wouldn't have been able to do that if it was recorded 3 months ago. And I don't know what performance she would have lip synced it, but it's like that is why like it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they still would have been able to do it. I mean, they are actors, it's their job, right? You would
Hmm.
expect they should be able to, but there's something about being in the moment, I guess. Like I was watching the commentary, I couldn't believe how many takes they had to do, but because it's singing live, it's too difficult to edit together different live takes. So you do like 17 takes of a song. But I think Eddie Redmayne, who plays Marius, wanted to keep doing takes because he'd get more and more emotional as it went. And I was like, oh, that, yeah, I mean, really, I guess you get really into it after a while rather than just exhausted by it, or both. And then the tears come out faster because you are exhausted. I don't know. But yeah, I kind of liked, when they're running around in the streets with Gavroche. It just was funny that, like you say, with Cats is so weird and just doesn't make sense in so many ways. But so many of the choices he made in Les Mis made perfect sense in terms of transporting it out of the theater and making it feel relevant. I don't know how he did that. But to be fair to the Phantom, I will say this: the opening into the opening music, the theme song, I did really like that. And I thought they did that in a really cinematic way. So it starts black and white, where they're at the auction in the old opera house, selling off items from that time period that we're about to join. It's a little monkey symbol music box. They reveal the chandelier under the tarp, and suddenly it's like all this wind and all the dust that's coming off the theater, and the chandelier starts to rise back up, and it switches as like the dust and the tarps get pulled off all the seats, they get repaired, and it turns into color. That whole sequence I thought was really great. Like I was That's probably the most impressive part of the whole movie. It felt exciting, and it felt like going back in time in a way that you can't really do in the show. Do you know what I mean?
I had some hope. I was like, this is gonna be exciting, and then it was just so draggy and lifeless after that.
Yeah, it's not great that the best part is at the beginning, but I I want to give it some credit because I think that they took advantage of the magic of movies in that moment to do it. But then they kept going back to those flashbacks throughout the movie, which they don't do in the show at all. And it just felt so out of place where it was like, you're trying to just get back to this magical moment, and then it just didn't work at all. I'm not sure why they did that. And it's too bad because they have the few scenes that are outside the theater. When you see it on the stage, they look massive somehow. Like when Christine's kind of singing to her dad before Marius comes out to see her. The staging for that, she looks so small in comparison. I think it's the rooftop of the opera house. It looks amazing. And I just feel like in this one, it didn't look as good as what I remembered the stage looking like. And then I went back and watched the Royal Albert Hall anniversary, and even their staging made the scale look bigger and more fantastical than the movie. So it's kind of a disappointment. I don't know why they were so restrained, especially because it's Joel Schumacher. Like, restrained is not something that you normally say about him. It's usually really bonkers. It wasn't even as camp as I expect from him either.
What I couldn't believe is the Phantom of the Opera is 2004. So it was 8 years before Les Mis was made. And he had more money. I think the budget for Phantom was like 80 million and Les Mis was 60. So I'm like, wait, what? How?
What did they do with all of that?
Spend it on smoke. I mean, that sequence looks so fake too. I'm like, what? This looks like a bad stage that they're on. I don't know what it was.
I guess. And then even with the costumes, I mean, I did like a lot of them, but the biggest letdown for me was the masquerade scene. Because I don't know if you've seen the costume that gets used mostly in the stage productions for the Phantom in that scene, but it's way cooler. Like, I think they just wanted to show off Gerard Butler's body, so they put him in like a tight suit. And then his mask was really kind of a basic looking skull, but in the show it's like this really gnarly skull mask, and it's a really elaborate red costume, but he looks so terrifying when he comes out. This one, it just seemed like, I don't know, he was just gonna hit on some people and be like, who's this sleazy guy hitting on everybody, rather than who's this terrifying man terrorizing us.
What did you think of, or do you want additions? Were you offended by additions or changes when they make it into a film?
The only addition I am ever offended by, maybe offended is too strong a word, but yeah, annoyed by, is the addition of a new song so they can get an Oscar nomination. They both do it, and they're both terrible. The Phantom one is Minnie Driver singing something about being lonely. I don't even remember.
But isn't that just over the end credits?
That's true. It is just over the end credits. Thank goodness. But the biggest letdown of Les Mis for me is that song "Suddenly," right in the middle after he gets Cosette and takes her away. I was going to ask you, did you know that that was a new song when you saw it?
Yeah, I heard a lot about that. I didn't mind it. The funniest thing is, remember for the Academy Awards, because suddenly was nominated, that he comes on and sings like four verses of it, and like, okay, just stop, and everybody's gonna sing one day more. I was like, we don't want to hear any more of that song. We know we had to nominate it, but let's sing a good song.
Yeah, which is probably the right decision. But to me, and it's maybe because I've listened to too much, I feel like it stuck out so much. It did not fit in with the rest of the score, because there's really only, same with the Phantom, a few scores, a few songs that get sung, and then they change the lyrics or they change the pacing, so it all flows because you recognize the melodies throughout, and that one just didn't work for me. But if it's the same melody, then it can't get an Oscar nomination because it has to be all new, blah blah blah. Thank goodness it didn't win though. But otherwise, I guess it depends what they add, but I feel like neither of these really adds anything that I can think of. Like, Les Mis moves some things around.
Like, what did you think of them moving back? I Dreamed the Dream, a couple of scenes. Do you think it worked better, or
So Les Mis, the stage, I think she sings it earlier. Like, not, she sings it right after she gets fired from the factory. And then with The film version, it's when she, is it after she becomes a prostitute? Is that right?
Yeah, it's after.
Yeah. I think it, I think his choice makes sense. I don't think it really affects it negatively. And I think it works in either position. I'm not so beholden to it that it has to be where the original was. As long as it makes sense to me, then it works. And I think it does work. What did you think? Because they also do that with Stars, which is Javert's song. I think he sings it later in the stage production, so it's the reverse, and sings it earlier in the film. That one maybe a little bit more, but that's just, I feel like that's just me picking at it. I still feel like the Hooper had enough of a good reason to put it there.
It works for me because like she's really down at this point, so then she sings it about her situation. And I was thinking about the difference it would have made in terms of characterization. If she sings it earlier, I think it makes you look at her like her whole life has just been horrendous. So, of course, she's going to turn into a prostitute because it's all
Mm-hmm.
been bad. Whereas in the movie, it's just sort of like, it's just getting worse and worse. There's no good to this. But yeah, I mean, it just doesn't radically change anything.
Yeah, I think it's in the stage version. When it's earlier, it gives you a chance to get to know her better sooner, which can be a good thing. But I think in the movie version, it didn't feel like you didn't know her by that point. So yeah, I think it's fine. The only thing I would pick about with the Javert song is that when he sings it in the stage version, it's years later now. So for me, it's like Javert almost forgot about Valjean, and this guy from his past comes, and he realizes that he can't let him go. So I think there's more at stake mentally and emotionally for Javert when he sings it later. But I kind of get, like, it makes sense when they put it earlier too. It's not anything that it doesn't ruin anything. I
Hmm.
just think there's more passion if he sings it later because he's like, I don't care that it's been 8 years or whatever it is. I'm going to get this guy because this is what I stand for. But then again, if it's earlier, you get a chance to know him a bit more. Although you would if the performer performed it in a way that had any impact or emotion, you would get to know the character.
All right, Christine, let's get into it.
Okay, like you said, I understand the urge to cast non musical actors in a film version. I do. I get it. But there's so, you're telling me of all the film actors out there, for both of these choices, these are the best that you could get? Like, you couldn't find one with just even a little bit of voice training? I know Russell Crowe's in a rock band, which I haven't listened to, but I mean, he wasn't even that big at this point. He was a little bit passe at this point, too, right? At least with Gerard Butler, he was an up and comer, and they wanted like this like sexy, cool kind of rock and roll phantom, which maybe he was in the UK. I think over here he wasn't quite at that point yet for us. So it almost makes more sense because he's at the beginning of his career, but Russell Crowe was not. I just don't get it. I don't get it. Even Amanda Seyfried, she's not known as a strong singer, but she had some training. Like I read about her, she had Broadway voice at coach when she was a kid, opera voice coach when she was a kid. Same with Anne Hathaway. She had opera voice training when she was a kid. Give me something to work with. And it's okay, last little bit of my rant. It's hard for me because Javert has my most favorite song in the whole musical, Stars. It's amazing. And you get nothing from it. So it's not even just that his singing is bad. I don't know about you, but it felt passionless. Like I felt it was all one note, literally, in terms of singing, but also one note emotionally. Like I wish I could. Well, maybe you can tell me when you watched it. Do you feel anything for Javert? Like, what do you think about him when you watch this movie?
I remember the first time. weeks into its release, people were already crapping all over him. I was like, oh wow. I wasn't surprised. Whenever I see actors that I've seen a lot, and I don't know their background, but it doesn't really matter to me. I've never seen them sing. So for me, sometimes it is like a train wreck. I'm like, okay, let me see how bad this is gonna be. So when they're not horrific, I'm like, oh, okay. I was impressed by Hugh and Hathaway. And for Russell Crowe, he definitely stuck out where I'm like, what movie does he think he's singing in? But I was like, well, at least he's sort of singing at a certain choice that he made. And then I kind of just didn't think about it. But as I said, soon after, I would watch the 25th anniversary of Les Mis. I was like, this is Javert. This is like this is a singer. It's Norm Lewis. I'm like, oh my,
Yes.
this is unbelievable. And then now when I look at Russell, it's unfair. I don't know if it's unfair, but in comparison, I'm like, wow, he is really horrendous. He is the worst Javert I've ever seen of all the clips I've ever seen.
Yeah, Norm Lewis is my favorite Javert in terms of singing voice. He's just, oh, his voice is just incredible. But he, again, there you go. Somebody who some people might think is just a television and film actor. Like he was in Da 5 Bloods this year. It's a beautiful singing voice. It should have cast him. But I have to say, to be fair to Russell Crowe, I had the same reaction from when you first hear Russell Crowe sing in Les Mis as I did when I first heard Gerard Butler sing those first notes in The Phantom. And the reaction was, yeesh, like, it's not good. it's, it's just like this honking kind of, it's just like a droning. But I will argue that I think Gerard Butler, okay, well, I was going to ask you actually. That was my question for you. Who did it worse? Russell Crowe or Gerard Butler?
I think Russell Crowe because I don't know what he's doing. The way he sings, I was like, oh, this is so odd. A choice because I think I've seen clips of him singing it, and it's not like his normal so-called singing voice.
Oh,
It's
really?
it's just like he's trying to do opera or something. I'm like, oh man, this is really not good. So in terms of Gerard Butler, I think I messaged you like right after I watched the Royal Albert and seeing Ramin sing incredibly. I was like, oh yeah, there was that movie, and then I went to YouTube, and that's when I was like, I completely forgot. I was like, wait a minute, Gerard Butler is the Phantom? Like I just couldn't start listening to these clips, and it didn't honestly sound horrendous to me. It just sounded like Gerard Butler's voice trying to sing, and if that makes sense. Like it didn't sound like a singer.
Totally, totally. You could hear the slight Scottish accent in there. like, yeah, it did sound more like that. Russell Crowe didn't quite sound like that. But I think I'm going to give it to Gerard Butler, even though the Phantom is the lead and is way harder to sing. He has a way harder job. And, you know, if you tally up the mistakes, Gerard Butler would have more just because he sings more. And there's so much range that you need to sing those Phantom songs, which he just doesn't have. But I feel like he's acting when he's singing. You know, he sort of sings kind of angry and then he sings soft and hurt. There's ups and downs. They don't always sound good, but there's some kind of motivation or passion behind it. Whereas with Russell Crowe, I didn't feel like there was any acting going on there, except slight befuddlement from time to time. Do you know what I mean? It's just, I don't get, it makes me feel like he's just nervous the whole time and was too focused on singing to think about acting at the same time, which is weird because he's not a bad actor. I mean, we both, like we've seen The Insider and LA Confidential. He's great in LA Confidential. I gotta say, Russell Crowe loses this round and Gerard Butler wins for me simply because one of them is a better multitasker.
And that's what's so ironic that Russell was doing it live, and you could have emoted. Whereas Gerard Butler's lip syncing, and it does seem better.
Yeah, it makes no sense. It's like, I think the way you put it is perfect. I just don't understand what he's doing. I don't get it, and yeah, it's personally frustrating for me. So when it comes to having like a mix of musical actors and Hollywood actors, people who can sing, people who can't sing, do you feel like it's jarring when they're mixed up like that? Like when you hear Gerard Butler sing and then Patrick Wilson shows up with his beautiful soft singing voice, does it make you be like, oh God? Or did you get that sense with either of these, or did you feel like you were able to kind of forget?
It didn't bother me that much because I'm not, as I said, my expectations are so low that I was like, oh, it's not bad. Like, I think I kept joking that you've told me many times that Patrick Wilson's a beautiful singer, and every time I'm like, what are you talking about? There's no way. And he does have a beautiful voice. The one thing that bugs me about him in the movie is his hair, which is
Ugh, I totally agree. That hair is awful.
like, what is that? I just put in a ponytail and just get it out of my face.
Yeah, or just get a better wig, even. It just clearly seems like they just plopped a wig on him. Doesn't suit him at all. I guess it's period, but isn't he supposed to be kind of fancy and rich? You think it would be more slicked back? Be a
Yeah,
little bit more under control. I don't know.
and
I agree. I'm glad you said that.
and then all the crossovers. As I again first time I read that Anne Hathaway was supposed to play Christine, but she was doing Princess Diaries too.
Yeah, what do you think about who would you have liked better?
I guess Anne could have had the range for that, but Emmy Rossum is a great singer. I think she actually does have a better voice. So I think that worked out.
Yeah, I think she does too. Anne Hathaway's voice is okay, but yeah, you can't really beat Emmy Rossum.
Well, apparently Hugh was one of like 10 actors that they were considering for the Phantom. So that would have been mind blowing.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That would have been amazing. But then would he not have been able? Do you think they would still cast him as Valjean, or would it have been like?
You got to play both.
That's the thing. It's true. They all play both. Colin played both. Ramin played both. I did read that Paul Bettany was originally Javert, and I didn't think I've never heard of him singing. I tried to find video, but I still just feel like anyone would have been better. So I'm happy. I would have been happy to see Paul Bettany as Javert.
But in terms of your questions, like Samantha Banks, she was Eponine in stage play and the film. And again, that's where I do get annoyed about these prejudices where it's like, oh, you're great. You're a small role, so you can come and be in the movie. I don't know. It's just
Well, Eponine is a pretty big role, and she has one of the biggest songs from the show. Like, ask any 12-year-old girl who's into Les Mis, they sing that song over and over again. They say they want to be Eponine. They don't want to be Cosette. Nobody wants to be Cosette.
isn't Cassette like the worst character in the movie slash play? Like her character does nothing.
Yeah, she does nothing. It's true.
I remember
That's why Cosette's most famous song is when she's the little girl who's in it for one scene.
exactly. So I don't blame Amanda. I was like, well, I just don't even think about her. I remember being annoyed the very first time I watched it, where Marius sees her and falls in love. I'm like, why? Like, okay, it's just a plot convention. I just sort of accepted it.
Damn, Peter. It's
Oh,
love at first sight. He doesn't know her yet.
well, getting to know her, he should have backed off.
No, she just has to look good. It's true. And I will say, for a pretty unremarkable character, the scenes of Amanda Seyfried in the apartment with like all that beautiful designed wallpaper in the background, it makes Cosette memorable. I guess that's something, but I also don't really like Amanda Seyfried's weird vibrato singing voice. But I don't mind it as much because when the she sings with Eddie Redmayne or when the three of them sing together with Samantha Banks, her voice sounds good with them, in my opinion. So I don't mind her, but yeah, it's weird that they got such a big name person for Cosette. It was kind of unnecessary.
All right, Christine, you haven't geeked out about Hugh yet.
Oh my god, I know I'm trying to contain myself. I'm geeked out enough about Colm and Ramin and everybody else.
I love in the interviews that Tom Hooper said, if Hugh Jackman didn't exist, I wouldn't have made this movie.
Perfect. That's the smartest thing he ever could have said. So Hugh Jackman did a one-man show. I think it was like 2010 or something like that. I went to see it. My two aunts were visiting, and so my mom and I, well, let's take them to see a show. They like anything in the theater because they don't where they live. They don't get a lot of big theater productions. And the only thing that was on was Hugh Jackman's one man show. None of us were a big fan. We just knew it was Wolverine. And I was like, well, one man show is always good. How bad could it be? It was incredible. By intermission, the four of us looked at each other and we're just like, is this the best thing we've ever seen? Like, we're all completely sold. But when he was doing that show, he announced that he was going to be Valjean. And it was towards the end of the show. And I remember all of us were like on board immediately because he had the stamina. He's not the strongest voice you've ever heard, but he's got a good range for somebody who claims to have never been a professional singer. I went to see his second one-man show last year, which was really good. And he goes through his life story, and he said he just kind of faked it his first time he got cast in a musical. And I just find it so hard to believe because Valjean is one of the most sought after roles ever, and he does such a good job. Honestly, that scene in the church at the beginning where the bishop lets him go for stealing all the silverware, and he has like that crisis moment where he sings to the camera and he's crying while he's singing. This last time that I watched it is the only time, and having seen it maybe 3 or 4 times, where I didn't cry. I cry almost every time. I don't know how he can cry and sing like that. I guess Eddie Redmayne did a good job too, though, when he's singing at the end, empty chairs and empty tables, crying and singing. Man. But I'm a huge fan of Hugh. If he were the Phantom, I think he would have done a good job, except I'm not sure if he's dark enough. Like, you have to be kind of dark and cool. And I don't know that he has enough edge to be the Phantom, but he would have been able to sing it well, so I don't think it would have been that bad. I'm not sure who non-musical theater would be a good Phantom, but I can just say, I mean, I think he carries this movie 100%, which he has to because that's the role, but he really does all the way through. I believe all of the versions of Valjean. Can't say anything more about him. What do you like? You think I'm crazy, or are you down with it?
Yeah, he's great. Like, I've always loved Hugh Jackman. The first time I saw Wolverine, again, I think it was you where you told me that he was a singer. I'm like, get out. And I think you're right in terms of the Phantom, because everything I've seen him in, everything I've read about him, he's such a nice guy that I don't know if I could have accepted him as a Phantom being this miserable, deformed guy, just angrily, locked away in the theater, which is probably unfair because, he's an actor, so he can do anything. But yeah, I love Hugh Jackman. He was great in this movie.
Although I guess we both just mentioned him being Wolverine, and that's kind of, the smart ass, cynical, edgy kind of character. And even Logan, right? So maybe he would have been okay.
All right, Christine, let's get into like the songs themselves. And I wanted to ask you, did you find it very strange that in Phantom they say Christine a million times?
I'm so used to it. Okay, so obviously I grew up in the era, I was a kid when Phantom came out. I have lived my entire childhood / adult life having my dad shout that at me for fun. As soon as the Phantom came out, he knew about it because my mom sees shows. We went to see it. It was a massive hit. So people always sing that to me. So it doesn't really affect me anymore. I did it first. It felt weird. I guess it is a lot after after a while. Like, you can't not notice it if your name is Christine, but you just have to phase it out because it gets to be too much.
Well, I noticed it in My Name's Not Christine. I'm like, what the hell? Why do they keep saying her name in every song or every time she shows up or what a character just like I don't know what it was about that. But I thought it was hilarious.
I think they might even do it more in the stage production. Christine, Christine, why? Why? Like I've heard that so much. So much in life.
Does it throw you off when a character, any character, has your name?
Oh, it doesn't throw me off, but it's more like I picture like when a dog hears a strange whistle sound and its ears kind of prick up and it turns its head a little bit. That's kind of what I do. But I mean, do you feel you got a common name?
Nicolas Cage in Vampire's Kiss, his name is Peter.
That's
But
right.
every other character doesn't say, Peter, you're acting weird today. Peter, why? Like, that's what is mind-boggling about Phantom. I'm like, why is everybody saying her name over and over again?
It's true. It is pretty weird. And I don't think Andrew Lloyd Webber does that in any of his other shows. I don't know. His girlfriend at the time was playing the first Christine, so maybe he was just obsessed with her. I kind of think that, like, we were talking about Hollywood actors, casting Gerard Butler or Russell Crowe is kind of like stunt casting. I feel like Andrew Lloyd Webber is the originator of stunt casting, but he used to be good at it. And then he's getting, by the time he got to Phantom 2004, he lost his touch. Well, I'm talking just like over the course of his career. So, like, when he started with Jesus Christ Superstar, it was a concept album. It wasn't on stage, it was just a record. But he cast the lead singer from the band Deep Purple. But the thing is, that guy can actually sing. Like, he is an amazing singer, and it sounded great. And then, you know, Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, the Toronto production, he cast Donny Osmond, which sounds cheesy, but Donny Osmond's got a good voice. Like, he's a singer first, actor second. And I saw that production and it was really good. I don't even like that show, but it won me over. And then, like, Glenn Close, he put in Sunset Boulevard, and she's not a trained singer, but she has a good voice and she pulled it off. And I've seen her do it and it's incredible. But then, like, you get into like Madonna being Evita, and I feel bad saying this, but Antonio Banderas in Evita, but I actually kind of like him. But it was stunt casting, right? They needed like a sexy kind of Spanish guy to be in it, and he was super popular at the time. But his voice is okay. I've heard him sing songs from The Phantom, and he can actually pull it off. So, but it's just I feel like it's because of Andrew Lloyd Webber that we get people like Russell Crowe in Les Mis, where they're just like, no, he's cool. Gerard Butler, what a cool guy. Can he sing? Whatever, we'll figure it out. Like, that's such a Lloyd Webber thing to do.
So you mentioned your favorite song from Les Mis, but what's your favorite song in Phantom?
I don't know. It is. I really like Masquerade. It's just such a sweeping tune. I just really like it. There's not much to it, but I like the score. Um, Music of the Night, maybe? That's really nice. What about you?
Well, this struck another thought with me because I'd say Music of the Night is my favorite, which is like the big song. Like that's like the showstopper. And I found it very strange that it's so early in the play. I thought, well, that's weird because for films, you have to save that to the end. Like you have your grand finale, but they don't do that with musicals. And I Dreamed a Dream, it's in the first act. It's like, wait, that's the song that everybody knows. So I was shocked when I first saw it the very first time. I'm like, oh, that's weird because I'm thinking filmically. I was like, shouldn't this be
Mm-hmm.
the big showstopper? But of course, plot wise, it has to happen near the beginning. I thought, well, I guess the closest it comes to is Cats. Like, Memories is near the end.
Mm-hmm.
But it straight struck me that both of these are at the beginning. Yeah, I Dream the Dream is not my favorite song in Les Mis either. Even though it's the big one, it's One Day More. Like everybody coming together and all the characters doing that, and also it's because of you because ever since that movie, whenever anything is coming up, we send each other that meme. There's one day more. We're fine. We're excited. And of course, it's the song everybody does for flash mobs.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So I've watched tons of those, and I'm like, oh, this is so cool. So that's the song that stays in my head all the time after the movie.
Yeah, I think it was building up to like a holiday break, and I sent that the day before we were supposed to stop working. It's a good one. I just want to point out two little things in each of them, and I think that's the last thing I have to say that annoyed me. In the Phantom, when Raoul goes to Christine's grave at the end, it just says beloved wife and mother. She was a dancer and an opera star. What is that about? That infuriated me. They totally just ruined her reputation. Number one. Number two, why is Javert's death so brutal? I can't watch that scene.
In the commentary, he says, oh, he has to land that way, so it proves to the audience that he's dead. If he falls in the water, people might think he's alive.
That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. When you're watching the stage show, you don't think, oh, he just fell off the bridge. He'll be back later. I think it's pretty clear that he's ending his life. And he doesn't like slip. He straight up just leans and falls over. Ugh. Well, it was extra brutal. Like, I don't need to see his back break.
And it was very unnecessary, but I'm like, oh my God, he actually had a reason for it. And that's one of the few things I remember in the stage play when I saw in Toronto. Like, I loved how they did that, when they pulled him back. He just disappears into the blackness of the stage. I'm like, oh, that's genius.
Yeah, even in the original production, they do it in a really, really cool way as well. So, should we talk about the trailers?
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, I threw in like the Les Mis international trailer in the last minute.
Yeah, I watched both of them. I guess the North American trailer would be the first one.
Yeah, just the I Dream the Dream, essentially.
I didn't like it. I really hope it's fine. It shows you the movie looks good, but I actually don't think her singing that song is good enough to be in the entire trailer. I thought the international one was way better with the medley of songs and the action. It shows you almost the entire movie, which is a bit much. But like you can't how can you have a trailer for Les Mis without One Day More or Do You Hear the People Sing melody in it? I was annoyed.
Yeah, that's why I included in the last minute, because I was like, there's got to be a better trailer than this. And it's weird how that was the only one. But for all of these trailers, including the Phantom, I also thought, I don't know how you promote this. Like, you can't do the traditional thing where you can't even try to have a proper semblance of a plot. You know, it's like, well, people are coming because of the name and the music, so let's just do that. But yeah, the international Les Mis trailer is way better. And I find it hilarious that they basically took all the non-singing dialogue. It's like, oh, somebody spoke. Put it in there. Put it in there. What about the Phantom trailer?
Well, I think the Phantom one is just like what you said. It's like they were like, how can we do a trailer for a musical? Well, let's just make it exciting. Like, it's a really good medley, and then it's just a bunch of really fast editing of cool looking things happening. You can't tell what's going on, but I actually really liked it. I thought it was really exciting. It's like, I would want to see this.
But they make you think it's an action movie.
Oh, totally. I know that editing, it's almost too fast where I couldn't quite tell what was happening at any moment, but it'll make you want to see it. Doesn't mean if you get there and you're disappointed, that's your problem. That's not this trailer's problem.
Yeah, I don't like any of them, but I'd actually choose the international Les Mis.
I think I would choose the Phantom just because after a while I was like, okay, are they really going to show you every act of this musical? But I think the music was better done
Mm-hmm.
in the international trailer.
Hey, Christine, make your decision.
Well,
Or
it has to be Les Mis. I mean, for all the reasons we said, it made it feel cinematic without losing almost any of the things that made the stage production good. The only downside is the casting, I think. That's the only downside. I think it did everything else really well. The Phantom, I actually don't mind it. I wasn't as bored as you were. It just feels really limited. And if you're gonna have Schumacher and Andrew Lloyd Webber, you gotta let them camp it up, and they didn't do that enough. So Les Mis wins.
Yeah, there's no question. It just cinematically, it just everything about it just works so much better. And as I said, I'm not a fan of either one of the directors, but Tom Hooper, I think he figured out what to do, and in his choice of having them sing live, I think was a huge advantage, and you could see people emoting and acting, whereas I just found some really flat for whatever reason. I don't know if they sung live, it would have fixed it. So it's a lot more than that. It was pretty lifeless, and that's pretty sad for something that's so iconic.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I agree. All right.
You notice I was saying your name a lot?
No, I didn't. See, I just space out.
I was building, I kept saying.
Between that Phantom stuff and then working with people who call me Christina, I feel like I just completely space out on whatever anyone calls me.
He says your name, just like
Yeah.
join us next time when we discuss Christmas in action movies with Die Hard and Batman Returns. Thank you for listening.